Okay, so for our lab, we are doing a titration, right? A titration is a controlled reaction between two chemicals that we're going to stop usually with a visual endpoint, like a color change kind of thing. So we're going to use a ring stand for this. We've got these ring stands, and we've got the wooden ring stands that are over by the other window. Either one of them work just fine. This one has a utility clamp on it, right? So ring stand and utility clamp. We oftentimes put rings on the ring stand to hold stuff up. The utility clamp, we're going to go like this. And then if you look, it looks kind of weird right here. That's to hold on to things like test tubes and burettes and stuff. We want to be very careful with these burettes. The more precisely we make something, it's weird to just look at my chin. The more precisely we make something, the more accurately it's marked, the more expensive it is. So these are very expensive. Don't break these. They are not a sword. I know I want to swing them around and it's so satisfying to hear that broken glass, but no, right? We want to be careful with these. Even right? If I'm carelessly swinging this thing around, this tip is can break pretty easily. So when we are done, we also need to make sure and rinse it out very good, right? So what we're going to do, and hopefully you're watching this video while your cabbage juice is going, so you can get this stuff set up while it's heating, right? So you're not just wasting a ton of time. So what I'm doing here is I use the thumb screw here to loosen this up. Then I'm going to bring this in here tighter, and I'm going to squeeze it with one hand, right, and make sure it's not moving. And then I'm going to tighten this guy down, tighten this little thumb screw down until it's like kind of firm. Now it's kind of crooked, and I don't really like that. So I'm going to loosen this one and straighten it up a little bit. It doesn't want to straighten up. That's just the way it's kind of holding in there. I'll tinker with this when I don't have camera stuff going to figure out how to get this guy straighter. But anyway, so you can look, mine's kind of at an angle here, which is not as stable. You want it straight up and down. But anyway, then we'll fill this first with water, right? We want to rinse it with this with water to make sure it's clean. So I'll have some water sitting out, and then you're going to want to rinse it with just a little bit of the base. There's enough for each group to have like 150 milliliters of base, which is way more than you need. But if you're wasteful and you get a bunch of stuff that you don't need, and then you dump it down the drain and all that kind of stuff, we're going to run out of stuff. So rinse it with just a couple milliliters of stuff. When you rinse it, you can use one of the funnels if you want, or if you feel comfortable pouring a beaker straight in, that's fine. No, these funnels you can't use. These funnels are too big, so you're going to have to just pour in with a beaker. So we'll take a beaker, get just a little bit of base in it, and we'll pour it like this. If you have the stop open, right, this is the stop, and it's got a hole drilled through it. If the stop is open, when you do that, it'll pour all over the floor. So you'll pour this in here like this, rinse it out, and then dump that into the sink, right? Rinse, and anytime you put something in the sink, run some water in there. Do that a couple of times because we want this to be clean and then any liquid that's in it to be the base, right? Then we're going to fill it all the way with the base. So we're going to fill it clear up past zero. And that seems strange to fill it past zero, but we want it to be marked we want to start at zero if we can. If we don't start right at zero, can you see that better with my hand there? If we don't start right at zero, we need to record our initial volume. Hopefully our initial volume is zero, but it doesn't have to be, right? You can start at 1 milliliter or whatever. You'll just subtract that off your final volume. So this guy's filled up to past zero. We then open up the stop and drain it down to zero, and then we're ready to titrate, right? I'm going to pause this and get set up for a pretend titration. So I have filled up the burette. I used green food coloring so you could see the liquid in the burette easier, and then I'm just draining it back into the same beaker. I'll go ahead and switch over to an Erlenmeyer flask. When you titrate, you'll want to titrate into an Erlenmeyer flask. These are nice because you can swirl them like this, right? They work the same as a beaker. They're made out of Pyrex and all, but if I swirl a beaker, it sloshes all over the place. So I prefer, if we have the equipment for it, to use an Erlenmeyer flask, right? But either way works just fine to do that. So notice my burette's a little too low to get to my Erlenmeyer flask well, so I loosen the thumb screw there, and I raise this guy up so it's above it a little bit, right? And then I make sure that it's stable before I move. And then you want to set it up so it's comfortable. Most people prefer to swirl with their, I don't like these utility clamps. Yeah, these I think these cheap wooden ones are a little bit better than the metal and plastic ones. So I'd use one of these if they're available. There's only 4 of them. I ordered 6, but they gave me 4 for whatever reason. But anyway, most students tend to want to be on their elbows when they do this, and then you don't have a lot of dexterity, right? This is not a great position to do this in. You want to stand up, and then while you stand up, you can go like this, right? And I can swirl and mix. And I'm going to set up some cabbage juice on my desk so you can tell what colors you're titrating for, but I can turn this on and turn this off. When you get close to the endpoint, when you're starting to see some color changes, you want to get to where you can like barely turn it on, right? So if I play with this a little bit, I can get it to where it can just like let out a couple drops at a time. So see, you kind of have to find just that spot. So see how it's just letting out drops now? I don't know how well you can tell that. Yeah, see how it's just letting out drops? So if you tinker with this, you can have it like full blast. You can have it going slower like it is now. You can have it going real slow. So tinker with that at the very beginning and figure out how that works. So you've recorded your initial volume. Let's say I've gotten to the color change that I want now by swirling that and have matched the color that's pH 7. Then I come up here and I read my volume real accurately here. And when you're reading that volume, a lot of times it can be kind of tough to read that volume. You want to try and adjust yourself as eye level as you can. And if you look at this, you can see the 6 and then the 7 there. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then there's the longer line of 5, 6, 7. And it looks like the bottom of the meniscus is right about 8. We should at least go to the nearest 1/10 of a milliliter, right? It's actually designed so you can go one past there, but I find students have a hard time getting to the nearest 1/10 of a milliliter. But really, it should be estimated one past that. You record that as your volume. And then if you got a good color that matches the cabbage juice up front pretty well, and you recorded that volume, you're ready to go on to your next trial. You don't have to re-rinse everything. Just refill and get a new vinegar solution, and you're good to go.